Moonlord, being the final boss of Terraria, is quite a challenging foe to defeat. At first glance, his attacks can seem random and difficult to predict, and for a long time, I personally didn't know much about the fight, so I had to rely on overpowered gear in order to defeat him in my playthroughs. Recently though, I've begun doing challenge playthroughs on my YouTube channel, which has forced me to learn the ins and outs of the Moonlord fight. And since I've been seeing some people in my comment section, as well as my Twitch chat, asking for some advice on Moonlord fights, I figured I'd make a video going over my Moonlord strategy that I've used to defeat the boss in all of my challenges. Now, the first thing that I'll say about the Moonlord fight, much like most things in Terraria, it can be approached in many different ways. High damage reduction can allow you to tank many hits from Moonlord, allowing you to focus on DPS rather than dodging. And the Rod of Discord can allow you to dodge the death ray without having to fly up and over the boss, for a couple of examples. My strategy, however, has almost no focus on items, and instead relies on a solid arena as well as good boss knowledge. This is because it needs to work with many different classes and weapon restrictions. So although this may not be the easiest way to beat Moonlord, my strategy is quite reliable and can work in many different scenarios. So without further ado, let's get into it. To start, let's talk about terrain preparation. I heavily rely on speed for fighting Moonlord, so the first thing I do is build a long flat platform out of asphalt. I normally try and aim for about a third of a medium world in length, although it by no means needs to be this long. However, the longer you make the platform, the easier the fight will be, so keep that in mind. Alternatively, if you don't want to craft that much asphalt, you could instead use a cheaper material such as dirt, and then use a quick mount for running instead. This will add a bit more challenge to the fight, but it can still work, and I actually used this exact strategy in my inverted blocks challenge, since I didn't have access to stone. Now that we have our platform built, let's talk about the items that I use. Like I stated before, this strategy doesn't rely too heavily on items, but there's still a few that you're going to need. First and most importantly are good wings. My go-to in most of my playthrough are steampunk wings because they're extremely easy to obtain. However, any post-Plantera wings will work, and if you're willing to put in the time, Fishron wings are going to be the best. Next, a cobalt shield or one of its upgrades, while not required, is highly recommended. Having knockback immunity during the fight can be a serious lifesaver. And finally, although I would assume most people would already have this, obtaining Hermes boots or one of its many upgrades is great for the movement speed that it provides. Beyond these items, I would say everything else is optional. Having a dash item like the Tabby can be useful, but it's not necessarily required. Additionally, you'll want to get the best armor available to your class, being Beetle, Spectre, Shroomite, or Spooky. Again, this isn't required, but it will help you a lot with damage and survivability. When it comes to weapon selection, this is where you have the most freedom. Your best option is probably to craft a weapon from lunar fragments dropped by the pillars, but I've made this strategy work with pre-mech boss weapons, so most should work just fine. Now that you have an arena built and your items collected, let's talk about the fight itself. The first thing that you should know is that there are two major phases, each requiring a different strategy. The first being the destruction of Moonlord's 3 vulnerable eyes, and the second being the destruction of his core. For the first phase, I rely heavily on visual and audible cues to dodge his attacks. When Moonlord first spawns, he'll shoot 2 bursts of phantasmal bolts, one from his head and one from his hand. These bolts will be targeted at wherever the player was at the time of firing, so stay on the ground and begin running to one side, and then jump over them right as they're about to reach you. Now, as you continue to run away from the boss, make sure to moderate your speed so that the boss stays barely visible on the side of your screen. If you get too far away from Moonlord, he will teleport to your location, which is bad. After a bit of time, Moonlord will fire another burst of phantasmal bolts at you, this time just from his hand. In order to dodge, listen for the sound and then prepare to jump over them. Once you've dodged this attack, it's time to start preparing for the hardest part of this phase. Soon after the attack that you just dodged, the top eye will open, so you want to start focusing your attacks on it. When one of the eyes is destroyed, a true Eye of Cthulhu will spawn and begin attacking you, so it's almost essential to destroy all 3 eyes at about the same time. Since the top eye has the most health and stays closed for about half the fight, you want to target it over the hands whenever possible. Not long after the top eye opens, another volley of phantasmal bolts will be fired, again this time from the hand and the forehead. This shot signals that Moonlord is about to fire his death ray, so immediately after dodging these bolts, begin flying up into the air, but make sure not to cross over the top eye. The death ray will sweep up and around Moonlord's head, starting on whatever side the player is currently residing. So wait until the beam starts firing, then cross over to the other side. Now that you're out of the way of the laser, the next thing you need to worry about are the phantasmal spheres that the hand is most likely spawning at this time. Try to either go around them or weave between them before they fire. Once past them, fall straight down between Moonlord's hands, and watch out for the burst of bolts fired from one of the hands. Once you've reached the ground, begin begin running away from the boss again. Normally, I'll run in the opposite direction that I was previously in order to avoid running out of platform. Soon after you've hit the ground, Moonlord will fire a final barrage of phantasmal bolts, again from his hand and his head. Try and use the same strategy of dodging these as you did previously. Now the cycle starts over again. Soon the top eye will close, and again you'll want to watch out for all of the same attacks in order. This loop takes some time to get used to, but once you get it down, you'll be able to survive the first phase without much trouble. After repeating this cycle enough, you will get all 3 eyes down to low health, and then you can destroy them, triggering the second phase. Now that Moonlord's core is exposed, you want to try and focus all of your firepower on it. Try to keep the core at such a distance that you can barely see it, or it's slightly off screen. If you do this, you're most likely to be just out of the range of the death rays that the true eyes of Cthulhu will shoot at you. Now sometimes they will reach you, so when you hear the sound of one firing, I would recommend dashing to the left just to be safe. The biggest threat that you'll have to worry about at this point are the rings of phantasmal spheres that the eyes will launch at you. They will continue in a straight line once fired, so try and either fly above or below them as they come at you. If you find yourself running out of platform, you'll need to turn around, and this is where you're the most vulnerable. First, if possible, wait until the true eyes fire their first death rays. Then, fly up and over the boss while avoiding the holes where the eyes used to be, since these deal contact damage. Once you're over, return to the same distance as before, and continue avoiding any attacks that are thrown at you. The final thing that you'll want to worry about during this phase of the fight is the Moonleech clots. When you see Moonlord grapple onto you, begin shooting along the tentacle, and try to destroy the blue clots traveling along it. If these clots reach the mouth, it'll heal the boss by 1000 health, so you want to avoid this if possible. And now, much like the first phase, you can pretty much just repeat this process until the core is defeated. And that's about it. My strategy for beating Moonlord. Now, the biggest thing that I want you to take out of this is that Moonlord takes practice. I used to be really bad at the fight, but after repeating it enough, I started to learn what to watch out for and what to avoid doing. So don't expect to immediately become a pro after watching this video, but I do hope that it helps highlight things to look for and sets you down the path to becoming a Moonlord pro. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to be notified when I upload more like it in the future. And if you'd like to see me fight Moonlord live, as well as do many other things, I have a Twitch channel that is linked in the description. But with that out of the way, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you to Beav Notice Me Senpai and all my other patrons for helping make this video possible.